You know that moment when your entire life changes in 30 seconds? When someone pours a full glass of wine over your head, and while you're standing there completely soaked, their parents start laughing like it's the funniest thing they've ever seen? Yeah, that happened to me, and I just stood there, wine dripping from my hair, running down my face, ruining my expensive silver dress, while 200 of the richest people in the city watched in silence. But here's the thing they didn't know. The thing that made me smile even as I felt that cold liquid sliding down my spine. I wasn't just some random woman at that charity gala. I was the one person who could save their dying empire. And the next morning, when they walked into my office to sign a $500 million deal, the looks on their faces? Priceless. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how one night of cruelty cost a family everything they had. Stay with me until the end, because this revenge, it's the sweetest thing you'll ever hear. And if you love stories about karma hitting hard, hit that subscribe button right now, because you're going to want to see what happens next. I remember every single detail of that night. It was a Friday evening, early autumn, and the weather was perfect. I had received an invitation to Lawrence Carter's annual charity gala 3 weeks earlier. Lawrence is one of those old-money billionaires who actually earned respect in the business world. We'd worked together on a few projects, and he was one of the only people who knew exactly who I was and what my company did. You see, I prefer to keep a low profile. While other CEOs are splashing their faces across magazine covers and business channels, I stay in the shadows. It's strategic. It's smart. And that night, it saved me from making a terrible mistake. I chose a simple silver gown, nothing too flashy. I wanted to blend in, to observe. My company was in final negotiations for a massive deal, and I had learned that the potential partner's family would be at this gala. I wanted to see them in their natural environment, watch how they treated people when they thought no one important was looking. Character matters to me. I didn't build my company from nothing just to partner with people who had money, but no integrity. The gala was held at the Grand Palace Hotel, one of those venues where even the doorknobs probably cost more than most people's cars. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, waiters in white gloves carrying champagne on silver trays. I walked in alone, checked my coat, and introduced myself to a few people as a business consultant. Nobody questioned it. Nobody cared. In these circles, if you look like you belong, you belong. That's when I first saw him. Brandon. 25 years old, expensive suit that probably cost $15,000, and a face that screamed entitlement. He was surrounded by 4 of his friends, all of them laughing too loud, drinking too much, treating the waiters like furniture. I watched him snap his fingers at a server, demanding another drink. The server, a young man probably working his way through college, apologized for some imagined slowness and rushed to get the drink. Brandon didn't even look at him. I was standing near the silent auction tables, pretending to be interested in a donated painting, when Brandon and his group moved closer. I heard fragments of their conversation, crude jokes about women, mocking comments about people they considered beneath them. One of his friends pointed at a woman across the room and made a disgusting comment about her appearance. They all laughed. Brandon was the loudest. I should have moved away, but something kept me there. Maybe I wanted to confirm my suspicions. Maybe I was testing the universe. Then Brandon noticed me. His eyes traveled up and down my body in a way that made my skin crawl. He whispered something to his friends, and they all turned to look at me. More laughter. I kept my face neutral, turned back to the painting. Inside, I was making mental notes. This was not someone I wanted to do business with, but Brandon wasn't finished. He stumbled toward me, wine glass in hand, that arrogant smirk plastered across his face. "Hey," he said, his words slightly slurred. "I haven't seen you at these things before. You new to our circle?" "I'm just here for the charity," I replied quietly, keeping my tone polite but distant. "Just here for the charity," he mimicked in a mocking voice. His friends laughed on cue. "Let me guess. You read about this in some newspaper and thought you'd come see how the other half lives?" I didn't respond. I learned a long time ago that silence is often the best weapon against bullies. I simply turned to walk away. That's when he grabbed my arm. Not hard enough to hurt, but firm enough to stop me. "Hey, I'm talking to you. It's rude to walk away when someone's talking to you. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. Please remove your hand, I said calmly. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Maybe he saw something there that warned him. But then his friends started making mocking sounds, calling him soft, and his pride kicked in. Instead of letting go, he tightened his grip slightly. You know what your problem is? He said, leaning closer. I could smell the wine on his breath. People like you come to these events and forget your place. You think putting on a nice dress makes you one of us? That's when I saw them. His parents, Gregory and Patricia. They had been watching from a few feet away, and instead of intervening, instead of being horrified by their son's behavior, they were smiling. Actually smiling. Patricia leaned over to Gregory and whispered something. He chuckled. I pulled my arm free from Brandon's grip. Excuse me, I said firmly, and turned to leave. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Brandon's face turned red with anger at being dismissed. He looked at his friends, at his parents, at the crowd that was starting to notice the commotion. And then, in a move that I think surprised even him, he lifted his full glass of wine and poured the entire thing over my head. The cold liquid hit my scalp first, then cascaded down my face, my neck, my chest. It soaked into my hair, ran into my eyes, dripped off my chin. My beautiful silver dress turned dark and heavy with the wine. I felt it seeping through the fabric, cold against my skin. I stood absolutely frozen, my eyes closed, my hands at my sides. The ballroom went silent. 200 conversations stopped mid-sentence. Even the orchestra seemed to pause, and then I heard it. Laughter. Loud, uncontrolled laughter. I opened my eyes, wine still dripping from my eyelashes, and saw Gregory slapping his knee, his face red with mirth. That's my boy, he shouted across the room. That's my boy, teaching manners. Patricia was bent over, laughing, her hand clutched to her stomach. These people, she gasped between laughs, these people come to our events and act like they belong. Brandon, darling, that was perfect. They high-fived their son. Actually high-fived him. While I stood there, completely humiliated, dress ruined, wine dripping onto the marble floor beneath my feet. I looked around the room. Some people looked shocked, some looked sympathetic. But nobody moved. Nobody said anything. Because Gregory's family had power, had money, had influence. And in rooms like this, power buys silence. Except for one person. Lawrence Carter pushed through the crowd, his face dark with fury. What the hell is wrong with you people? He shouted at Gregory. Do you have any idea who you just humiliated? Gregory was still laughing. Some nobody who snuck into our circle, Lawrence. Relax. It's funny. Funny? Lawrence was shaking with anger. This is Sophia. I held up my hand. One simple gesture. Lawrence stopped mid-sentence and looked at me. I shook my head slightly. His eyes widened with understanding, but he stayed quiet. I stood there for a moment longer, wine dripping from my hair, creating a small puddle on the perfect marble floor. I looked at Brandon, at his proud, smirking face, at Gregory and Patricia, still chuckling, wiping tears of laughter from their eyes, at the crowd of wealthy, powerful people who would do nothing because doing nothing was safer. And I smiled. A small, calm smile that made Lawrence take a step back. No, Lawrence, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the wine running down my spine. Let them enjoy tonight. Tomorrow will be very interesting. I walked out of that ballroom with my head high, leaving a trail of wine drops behind me. I heard the whispers starting as I reached the door. Heard someone ask who I was. Heard Lawrence's angry response to Gregory. But I didn't look back. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before I started driving. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. My makeup was ruined. My hair was plastered to my head. My dress was destroyed. And I was smiling. You need to understand something about me. My name is Sophia, and I didn't grow up in crystal ballrooms with champagne and caviar. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with my mother, who worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. My father left when I was 3. I don't even remember his face. My mother cleaned houses during the day, worked as a waitress at night, and did laundry for a hotel on weekends. I watched her come home exhausted, her hands red and raw from chemicals, her feet swollen from standing all day. And I watched rich people treat her like she was invisible. When I was 16, I went with her to clean a mansion in the suburbs. The family was hosting a party, but my mother had to finish cleaning the upstairs bathrooms. I helped her. We were carrying cleaning supplies down the back stairs when one of the party guests saw us. A woman in a designer dress and pearls. She looked at us like we were dirt she'd stepped in. "Make sure you use the service entrance," she said coldly. "We don't need the help mixing with the guests." My mother just nodded, said, "Yes, ma'am," and hurried me toward the back door. But I saw her face, saw the humiliation, the hurt, and I made a promise to myself that night. I would never let anyone make me feel that way. I would build something so big, so powerful, that people like that woman would have to respect me. It took me 20 years. 20 years of studying while my mother slept on the couch so I could have the bedroom. 20 years of working multiple jobs, saving every penny, teaching myself coding and business strategy from library books and free online courses. I started my company in my mother's garage with $2,000 and a used laptop, Novatech Solutions. We developed software that revolutionized data security for corporations. Within 5 years, we had contracts with some of the biggest companies in the world. Within 10 years, we were generating billions in revenue. But I stayed quiet. While other tech CEOs became celebrities, I remained in the shadows. I gave interviews rarely. I didn't do photo shoots for business magazines. I kept my personal wealth private. Most people in those fancy ballrooms had never heard of me, and that was exactly how I wanted it, because when people don't know who you are, they show you who they really are. Lawrence Carter was one of the few who knew. He had tried to convince me for years to raise my public profile, but I always refused. And that night, as I sat in my wine-soaked dress in my car, I was grateful for my anonymity. My phone buzzed. A text from my assistant, Jenny. "Ms. Sophia, is everything okay? Lawrence just called me. He sounds worried." I texted back, "I'm fine. Be in the office at 7 tomorrow morning. We have a meeting to prepare for." "The Harrison meeting?" she replied. "Yes," I typed. "It's going to be very memorable." You see, here's the thing they didn't know. Couldn't have known. Harrison Industries, Gregory's company, was dying. They had made bad decision after bad decision, rejected good advice, and alienated almost every potential partner. They were bleeding money, losing contracts, and facing potential bankruptcy. 3 banks had refused to give them loans. 4 major investors had pulled out completely. My company was their last hope. We had the technology they desperately needed. We had the capital to invest. We had the industry connections to save them. The $500 million deal we were negotiating wasn't just big for them. It was their only lifeline. Without us, Harrison Industries would collapse within 6 months. And Gregory, Patricia, and Brandon had no idea that the woman Brandon had just humiliated, the woman they had laughed at while she stood soaking wet in their friend's ballroom, was me, Sophia, the CEO of Novatech Solutions, the person who held their entire future in her hands. I drove home, walked past my doorman, who tried very hard not to stare at my ruined dress, and went straight to my bathroom. I stood under the shower for 30 minutes, washing the wine out of my hair, watching the purple-red water swirl down the drain. And I thought about my mother, about every time someone had made her feel small, about every dismissive look, every condescending word, every moment she had to swallow her pride to feed her daughter. And I thought about tomorrow. I arrived at my office at 6:30 in the morning. Novatech Solutions headquarters is a 50-story glass building in the financial district. My office is on the top floor with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city. I stood there for a moment, coffee in hand, watching the sunrise paint the buildings gold and orange. Jenny arrived at 7 sharp, as always. She's been with me for 8 years, and she's more than an assistant. She's a friend. The only person besides Lawrence who knows my whole story. "Tell me everything," she said, setting down her bag and her own coffee. I told her. Every detail. The wine, the laughter, the humiliation. When I finished, her face was red with anger. "Those absolute—" she started, but I held up my hand. "It's okay," I said calmly, "because in exactly 2 hours they're going to walk through our doors for the final contract signing, and they have no idea." Jenny's anger transformed into something else. A slow smile spread across her face. "Oh my God," she whispered, "they don't know it's you." "They don't know it's me," I confirmed. We spent the next hour preparing. Jenny pulled up all the files on Harrison Industries, their financial statements, which were disastrous, their company structure, which was inefficient, their market position, which was plummeting. We also pulled up something else. Security footage from the gala. Lawrence had sent it to me an hour after I left. Multiple angles of the wine incident, crystal clear images of Brandon pouring, of Gregory and Patricia laughing, of my calm exit. At 8:30, our receptionist called up. "Ms. Sophia, the Harrison party is here for their 9 o'clock meeting. Should I send them up?" "Give them our best waiting room," I said. "I'll come out to greet them in exactly 30 minutes. Jenny looked at me. "You're making them wait?" "I'm making them wait," I confirmed. "Let them get comfortable. Let them feel confident. It will make what comes next so much sweeter." For 30 minutes, I worked on other projects. I answered emails. I reviewed a contract for a different deal. I did not think about Gregory, Patricia, or Brandon sitting in my waiting room, probably scrolling through their phones, probably complaining about having to wait for some working woman, as Patricia had called me last night. At exactly 9 o'clock, I stood up, smoothed my navy blue suit, and walked out of my office. The waiting room was elegant. Comfortable leather chairs, modern art on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows showing the city below. And sitting there, looking slightly impatient, were the 3 people who had humiliated me less than 12 hours ago. I opened the door and stepped inside. The reaction was immediate and absolutely priceless. Patricia's hand flew to her mouth. Gregory's face went completely white. Brandon's phone slipped from his fingers and clattered on the marble floor. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. They just stared at me like I was a ghost. I smiled. The same calm smile I had given them last night. "Good morning," I said pleasantly. "I'm Sophia, CEO of Novatech Solutions. Please come into my office. We have a lot to discuss." Gregory stood up like he was moving through mud. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Patricia grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with shock and dawning horror. Brandon was frozen in his chair, his face cycling through confusion, recognition, and then pure panic. "Ms. Sophia," Gregory finally managed, his voice cracking, We had no idea." "That I was the CEO you were meeting with?" I finished for him. "Yes, I gathered that. Last night at the gala, lovely event by the way, though I have to say the wine service was a bit aggressive." I touched my hair, which was styled perfectly today, not a strand out of place. Brandon made a choking sound. "Please," I said again, gesturing toward my office, "we shouldn't discuss business in the waiting room." They followed me like condemned prisoners walking to the gallows. My office is large, deliberately designed to impress and intimidate. My desk is positioned so that when I sit, the morning sun is behind me, making it hard for people across from me to see my expression clearly. I've found this useful in negotiations. I sat down and gestured to the 3 chairs across from my desk. They sat. Gregory and Patricia perched on the edge of their seats like they might need to run. Brandon slumped down, his earlier arrogance completely deflated. "So," I said pleasantly, folding my hands on my desk, "shall we discuss the contract?" "Ms. Sophia," Gregory began, leaning forward desperately, "I cannot apologize enough for last night. We had absolutely no idea who you were. Brandon was drunk, he wasn't thinking, it was completely inappropriate, and we are so sorry." "Deeply sorry," Patricia added, her voice shaking slightly. "Brandon, tell Ms. Sophia how sorry you are." Brandon mumbled something inaudible. "I'm sorry, I didn't catch that," I said, my voice still pleasant but with an edge now. "I said I'm sorry." Brandon repeated, louder but with a petulant tone that suggested he wasn't sorry at all. I leaned back in my chair and regarded them for a moment. Then I pressed a button on my desk. The large screen on my wall flickered to life. "Before we discuss the contract," I said, "I want to show you something." The security footage from the gala began to play. They watched themselves, watched Brandon pour the wine, watched themselves laugh. The audio was crystal clear. "That's my boy, teaching manners," Gregory's voice boomed from the speakers. "These people come to our events and act like they belong." Patricia's laughter echoed in my office. I let it play twice. Then I turned off the screen. The silence in the room was deafening. "Your company is dying," I said, my pleasant tone gone now, replaced with cold professionalism. I pulled up their financial charts on the screen. 3 banks have rejected your loan applications. 4 major investors have withdrawn their support. Your stock price has dropped 60% in the last year. You're hemorrhaging contracts and clients. In 6 months, maybe less, Harrison Industries will cease to exist. Gregory's face was gray. Patricia was crying silently. "This deal," I continued, gesturing to the thick contract on my desk, "this $500 million deal with my company is your only lifeline. Without it, you lose everything. Your company, your reputation, your lifestyle, everything." "We know," Gregory whispered. "We know. That's why we're here. That's why we're begging you to look past last night. It was a terrible mistake, but please don't let one moment of stupidity destroy—" "One moment?" I interrupted. "Mr. Gregory, that wasn't one moment. That was who you are. That was who you've raised your son to be. That was your character, revealed when you thought there would be no consequences." Brandon suddenly stood up, his face flushed with anger. The arrogance was back. "Okay, look, this is ridiculous. Yeah, I poured wine on you. Yeah, it was rude. But we apologized. We said we're sorry. Are you seriously going to tank a $500 million deal, destroy our company, put thousands of people out of work, all because of some spilled wine? That's insane. That's just—" "Brandon, shut up!" Gregory hissed, grabbing his son's arm. But it was too late. I stood up slowly. "Thank you, Brandon," I said softly. "You just made my decision very easy." I pressed my intercom button. "Jenny, please cancel the Harrison Industries contract, permanently. Remove them from all future consideration." "No!" Patricia screamed, jumping to her feet. "Please, no, we'll do anything. We'll pay you extra. 50 million more, 100 million. Gregory fell to his knees, beside my desk. "Please," he begged, tears running down his face. "My entire company, all those jobs, my legacy, please." "Dad, what are you doing?" Brandon shouted. "Get up! This is embarrassing!" And that's when it happened. Gregory turned to his son, still on his knees, and the rage that crossed his face was terrifying. "You," he spat, "you did this. You destroyed everything I built, 30 years of work, gone, because you couldn't control yourself for one night." "This isn't my fault," Brandon shot back. "You're the one who laughed. You encouraged me." Patricia turned on her husband. "He's right. You thought it was funny. You always think his cruelty is funny, and now look what you've done. We're going to lose everything." They started shouting at each other, screaming. Gregory was still on his knees. Patricia was sobbing, and Brandon was yelling at both of them. It was chaos, a family completely falling apart in my office. I pressed my intercom again. "Jenny, please send security to escort our guests out." "You can't do this," Gregory shouted at me, finally standing up. "I'll sue you. I'll destroy you. You'll what?" I asked calmly. "You have no power here. No leverage, no options. You will leave my building now, or security will remove you by force. Your choice." 2 security guards appeared at my door, large, professional men who had clearly done this before. "Through the front lobby," I told them, "where everyone can see." As they were escorted out, I heard Patricia's sobs echoing down the hallway, heard Brandon cursing, heard Gregory making empty threats. And I felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just a cold, calm certainty that I had made the right choice. The news spread like wildfire. In the business world, news always does, but this was different. This was spectacular. By noon, every major business outlet had some version of the story. Harrison Industries' deal falls through. Tech giant Novatech walks away from massive contract. Harrison stock plummets after failed negotiation. But the real story was spreading through different channels, through texts and phone calls and whispered conversations in boardrooms across the city. The story of what had actually happened. Someone had leaked the gala footage. I suspected Lawrence, though he never admitted it. By evening, everyone in our business circles had seen it. Seen Brandon pour wine on me, seen his parents laugh, and seen my calm, dignified exit. Then someone connected the dots, posted a side-by-side image. Me at the gala in my ruined dress, me in a business magazine from 2 years ago, identified as Sophia, CEO of Novatech. The realization rippled through the business community like an earthquake. I spent the afternoon in meetings. Jenny kept me updated on the fallout. Harrison Industries stock didn't just drop, it crashed, 70% in a single day. Trading was halted twice because the decline was so steep. An emergency board meeting was called. Gregory was being questioned by his own board of directors about what had happened. But it got worse for them, much worse, because canceling our deal wasn't the only consequence. 2 of Harrison's other major contracts were suddenly under review. A client called to say they were going with a different vendor. Another big deal they'd been negotiating fell through when the other company cited concerns about company culture and leadership. I didn't do any of that. I didn't have to. In business, reputation is everything, and the Harrison family's reputation was now toxic. Nobody wanted to be associated with them. Nobody wanted to risk being the next one humiliated if things went wrong. Within a week, Harrison Industries was in free fall. Within 2 weeks, they were desperately seeking buyers, trying to sell off parts of the company to stay afloat. Within a month, they had filed for bankruptcy protection. Gregory, Patricia, and Brandon lost almost everything. The mansion went up for sale, the vacation homes, the cars, Patricia's jewelry collection, all of it, liquidated to try to pay creditors. Their friends vanished overnight. Country club memberships were quietly revoked. Charity boards asked Patricia to step down. Brandon was quietly asked to leave the exclusive gym where he'd been a member since college. But I didn't stop there, because the truth was, I had been planning something bigger all along. Remember when I said Harrison Industries was my last hope for them? I lied. They were never my first choice for a partner. There was another company, Harrison's biggest competitor. A firm called Titanium Enterprises, run by a CEO named Justin, who had been trying to overtake Harrison for years. 3 days after I canceled the Harrison deal, I signed an $800 million contract with Titanium Enterprises. $800 million. $300 million more than I was going to give Gregory. The announcement was strategic. I gave an exclusive interview to the biggest business publication in the country. I told them everything. My background, my mother who cleaned houses, the gala incident, my decision to cancel the deal, and my reasons. I built my company on the principle that respect and character matter, I said in the interview, that how you treat people, especially people you think have no power over you, reveals who you really are. I can't, in good conscience, partner with people who view humiliation as entertainment, who think wealth gives them the right to degrade others. The interview went viral, not just in business circles, everywhere. People shared it on social media. Morning talk shows discussed it. It became a cultural moment. Dozens of other CEOs and business leaders came forward with their own stories of being humiliated or discriminated against before they became successful. A movement started, of sorts. Companies began implementing character clauses in their contracts. Harvard Business School created a case study about my decision. And me? My company's value tripled. I got offers for partnerships from companies I'd only dreamed of working with. I was invited to speak at conferences, to sit on boards, to mentor the next generation of entrepreneurs. I started a foundation, used some of my wealth to create scholarships for kids from backgrounds like mine, kids whose parents worked 3 jobs, kids who were told they didn't belong. I named it after my mother. 3 months after the gala, I was working late in my office when Jenny buzzed me. "Ms. Sophia, there's someone here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important. It's Brandon Harrison." I was quiet for a moment. "Where is he?" "In the lobby. Security has him waiting there. Should I have them remove him?" "No," I said, "but tell security to stay close. I'll come down." I took the elevator to the ground floor. Through the glass walls of the lobby, I could see him. He looked different, thinner, older somehow, though it had only been 3 months. His expensive suit was gone, replaced by a cheap jacket and jeans. His hair wasn't perfectly styled. He looked ordinary, human. When he saw me, he stood up quickly. Security tensed, but I held up a hand. "Ms. Sophia," he said. His voice was different too, quieter, no arrogance. Can I have just 5 minutes, please?" I studied him for a moment, then nodded. 5 minutes. We sat in the lobby, far from the elevators, where other late-night workers occasionally passed by. Brandon twisted his hands together nervously. "I wanted to apologize," he said finally. "Really apologize. Not like before, when I was just trying to save the deal. I wanted to tell you that you were right, about everything." I didn't say anything, just waited. "My dad lost the company," he continued. "We lost the house. My mom had to get a job for the first time in her life. She works at a boutique now. My dad does consulting, makes a fraction of what he used to. And me? I work at a restaurant, washing dishes." He laughed bitterly. "It's actually kind of perfect, right? I spent my whole life treating service workers like dirt, and now I am one. And you know what I learned? It's hard. It's really hard. The guy who trained me, the head dishwasher, he works 2 jobs to support his family. He's up at 5 every morning, works until midnight, goes home and helps his wife with their kids, then does it all again the next day. And he's happy. He's genuinely happy. He treats people with respect, works hard, never complains." Brandon looked up at me. "He's a better man than I ever was. And I had every advantage, every opportunity, and I wasted it all by being a terrible person." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I wanted you to know that what you did, it didn't just destroy my family's company, it destroyed who I was, the person I thought I was. And that was a good thing. I was a monster. I hurt people because I could, because I thought their feelings didn't matter. I thought being rich meant being better than everyone else." He wiped his eyes. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking for a job or money or help. I just wanted you to know that I understand now. Why you did it, why you had to do it, and I'm sorry. For the wine, for the cruelty, for everything." I sat quietly for a moment, watching him, watching this broken, humbled version of the arrogant boy who had humiliated me. "Thank you for coming here," I said finally. "That took courage." "Will you ever forgive me?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I thought about my mother, about every person who had ever been made to feel small by someone like Brandon, about the server he had snapped at, the people he had mocked, the lives he had probably damaged without even noticing. "I already have," I said. "The moment I canceled that deal, I let go of my anger. Forgiveness isn't something I'm holding back from you. It's something I gave myself. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean there are no consequences. You're living those consequences now, and that's how it should be." He nodded slowly. "Thank you for seeing me." He stood up and walked toward the door. Then he turned back. "For what it's worth," he said, "you're the most powerful person I've ever met, and it has nothing to do with your money." Then he was gone, disappearing into the night. I stood there for a long time, looking out at the city lights. Jenny found me there 10 minutes later. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "I really am." So that's the story. That's how 1 glass of wine poured in cruelty cost a family $500 million and their entire legacy. That's how a moment of humiliation became a lesson in consequences. People ask me sometimes if I regret it, if I think I went too far, if I should have taken the money and the deal and just moved on, and my answer is always the same. No. Not for a second, because this wasn't really about the wine. It was never about the wine. It was about every person who has ever been made to feel less than because of where they came from. It was about my mother, scrubbing toilets while people like Patricia walked past without seeing her. It was about dignity, respect, and the fundamental truth that your wealth doesn't determine your worth. Brandon learned that, the hard way. His family learned it, and maybe, just maybe, some of the people who heard this story learned it too. My company is bigger now than I ever imagined it would be. My mother retired last year. She lives in a beautiful condo with a view of the ocean. She volunteers at a community center, helping other single mothers. She's never been happier. And me? I still keep a low profile. Still prefer to stay out of the spotlight. But now, when I go to galas and charity events, I wear my identity openly. Not because I need people to know who I am, but because I want them to see what someone from nowhere can become when they refuse to accept being treated as less than. If this story gave you chills, if it made you feel something, hit that like button. Subscribe to hear more stories about people who stood up when it mattered, and comment below. Tell me, would you have canceled the deal? Would you have taken the money? Or would you have done what I did and chosen dignity over dollars? Share this with someone who needs to hear that your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions of you. Share it with someone who's been humiliated, who's been made to feel small, who's been told they don't belong. Because the truth is, we all belong. Respect isn't something that should be earned. It's something that should be given freely to every human being, regardless of where they come from or what they do for a living. Next time, I'll tell you about something even more shocking. About a janitor who everyone mocked and ignored until the day he became their boss. You won't believe what he did with that power. But remember this. Remember it when you interact with the person who serves your coffee, who cleans your office, who delivers your packages. Remember that you never know who someone might become. You never know what power they might already hold. Treat people with respect, always. Because disrespect, as Gregory and Brandon learned, can cost you everything. I'm Sophia, and that's my story.